All right, so today I want to talk about ProBuilder. I mentioned it back when we were doing the space station. Let me get a share screen going. So ProBuilder documents here is a classic TMO, too many options. If any of you have played with Blender or Maya or some of the other 3D content programs, you'll find it both familiar and somewhat disabled. It's not as powerful as the professional tools, but the key is it runs inside Unity, so you don't have to deal with importing coordinate systems, all that other stuff. It's added to your editor through the package manager. It's a package. And one of the first things it does is it adds a whole slew of new primitives to the Unity standard shapes. The plane, cube, sphere, cylinder, and capsule now include prisms, doorways, pipes, cones, arches, tori, staircases, and pipe, all kinds of stuff. And most of these have considerable customization options, mainly having to do with size and the poly count. You can often adjust how many polygons are defined. There are a number of commands and options, some of which come from the tool's ProBuilder menu. That's ProBuilder and the various menus here. Others come from the ProBuilder window, which is dockable. That's this window here. In the window, these different options are all color-coded according to the kind of things that they can do. So red objects have actions on vertices, edges, and faces, whereas the greens have to do with operations on objects, and the blue have to do with various selection tools, and the orange are kind of miscellaneous things that open other tool panels that you can then use to do various things. Over in the scene view, there are these little toggles here that are kind of like the toggles that we had up here. This says we're working with an object, this with a vertex, this with an edge, and this with a face. So objects, vertices, edges, and faces. The tool panel includes things for new shape. Up here, I've already opened this and docked it, the new shape tool, and notice that all of these have a little hover over that tells you what they do. But here's the shape tool where I can now select what it is I want to build, anything from as simple as a cube, a prism, a cylinder, and so forth. This is the shape tool that lets us build all the different things. Then there are selection tools, and again, there's a huge list of these. You can select edge loops that'll like go around an object in a particular direction. And if you're going in the opposite direction, you can select a ring. Loops go one way, rings go another way, and you can do this with faces as well. You can select by material, you can select by color. Color is not really the color of your object, it's the color that you assign to vertices, edges, and faces for organizational purposes. You can grow things, grow the selection, shrink the selection, invert the selection. All of these are potential tools. The object tool includes triangulate, where you break the faces up into more triangles. You can do things with the normals. manipulate the UVs, the texture maps. You can, of course, export and ProBuilderize, which means you make something else into a ProBuilder object. Mirroring, merging, flipping normals, freezing the transform, and subdividing the object. All of these are tools. With the vertex tool, we can connect vertices, we can fill in holes, we can split vertices, collapse them, weld them, do other kinds of things. The edge tool includes things like a bevel, connected edge. We can extrude edges. We can bridge edges, subdivide edges, much, much more. Similarly, with the face tool, we can bevel it, we can subdivide it, we can break it into more triangles. We can detach faces, we can extrude faces. Things like this cylinder that I've made over here, I'll go ahead and build it. And now with the face tool selected, I'll select this face and extrude it. So really simple, the kind of things that you can do. And there's lots of documentation on each of these. And as with any TMO, you've just got to play with the different options until you're good at it. Going through the tool ProBuilder menu, there are all these different options, many of which are duplicated here in the ProBuilder window, but they're accessible from menus, and you can of course also see that there are shortcut keys, key combinations that will do a particular thing for you. There's common modeling tasks that we encounter. We want to transform an object. We can do this by translating, rotating, and scaling various geometry elements. And this lets you change the shape of some basic mesh. So while we have standards that we start with, it's easy to transform it. One of these ways of doing it is by extruding. I showed you that. We click a face and we pull it, and you can do this with edges or vertices as well. We can inset a face. This way we can kind of use the scale controls to drag the edges of the face inside the mesh. Then if you drag it in the opposite direction, it'll complete the inset. This is a trick for making windows. And you can subdivide edges and faces by inserting edge loops and subdividing. I can show you more of the primitives here in this scene sample objects. Don't save. Here's a cube, a prism, stairs. We can make stairs. And all of these, we can select how many steps and how steep they are. A cylinder, a doorway, a plane, which is kind of obvious. The difference between this plane and the Unity plane is you can set how finely resolved it is, how many triangles it has, which means if you need a plane with more than 10 by 10 vertices, you can make one. There's a cone, there's the arch, there's the icosphere, which makes a ball if you divide it finely enough. There's the torus or donut. There's a poly shape that you can make. You define the vertices of this thing and then extrude it. And so you can make basically any arbitrary shape. And then there's the Bezier shape where you make a Bezier spline curve, and it then creates this kind of snake-like object that you can do cool things with. One of the coolest things is Boolean Operations. And Boolean Operations lets you take two meshes and combine them. And you can either add two meshes together, or you can form the difference between two meshes, or the common geometry between them. Think of union of sets. Uh, and you can subtract one mesh from another. And let me just show you some of these. I think it's in here. Yeah, so um, here are a bunch of spheres that I made by uh, uh, hollowing them out by putting a small sphere inside a big sphere and then subtracting the small sphere from the big sphere. And then here are various objects with doors that I've made uh, uh, into these objects. And these are all physical objects with colliders and materials that we can map onto them. And we can go inside our sphere, and it's all very, very cool. And you can make pretty fancy houses with this as well. I mentioned colors. This is an organizational tool that once you've set up the colors, you can then select by color. So you could select all the blue vertices or all the orange vertices. When you do this, if you select an object, the whole thing becomes that color. If you select a vertex, it kind of blends the color from it to another vertex. If you select an edge, that edge is colored green and it grades off to the color of some other edge. And a face, of course, is blue. There's a material editor for managing materials that you commonly use. You can set up palettes of materials that you can then save and load. And these can be then accessed with hotkeys, which makes it quick and easy to apply materials. There's also a UV editor, which the UV mapping is how we map the textures onto our objects. And UV mapping, UV exploration, I think that's what I want. Don't say it. Yeah, so here's an object, and with UV mapping, you have a lot of flexibility. It's not just one texture for the whole object. Here I have different textures applied to different faces of the object. And if I want to uh, UV map, here's the UV editor. So with this object selected and picking a face, I now have access to that face's material. And I can see how this material fits on here. And it has a number this is the automatic section, UV mode auto, and there's UV mode, I got to select a face. There's manual mode and auto mode. With the auto mode, I can easily scale up my texture. And if I select the little rotate thing over here, I can rotate the texture. And you can break faces up into smaller pieces and rotate, scale, and modify the texture on individual faces. So all very powerful. And you notice this material, this object mesh has a whole bunch of materials added to it, but they're all adjustable here. So UV editor, it's a dockable window, automatic and manual. You can select vertices, edges, and faces and apply and manipulate how that texture is mapped onto a particular face. Lots of settings for different effects. A companion tool to this is the ProGrid. This is a tool that forces objects to snap precisely to a predefined grid of equally spaced points, and you can set the spacing so you can work kind of at a coarse scale, and then as you start to adjust things more finely, you can make the grid finer, and then things will pop to that grid. ProGrids is an example of a preview package, which means that you've got to load it from the package manager, which is also where one must load the ProBuilder. Here's the ProBuilder. It has some samples. In general, you want to use a verified version. There are some samples that you can load. This is verified for 2.19.4. There are other versions available. See all versions. So there are lots of versions available. This is how Unity is keeping things up to date now. And those are the preview ones. Previews are enabled by saying show preview packages. With a preview package, they warn us it may be unstable and it may change in the future, but they're certainly worth exploring. Here are tutorials and documentation on ProGrids. There are YouTube tutorials on ProBuilder. This is a nice one on building a house. I think this is actually one that I did where, don't save, I made this nice house. Nope, that's not it. There it is. So following this tutorial, I made these nice houses that are textured and have interiors and have windows and all kinds of stuff. And this tutorial shows you how to do this. There's one on crates and barrels. There's a guy who made a medieval house. It's relatively long, but he makes lots of mistakes and shows you how to fix them. And then one laying out a maze. And these are all very cool. And of course, one thing we need to do is make a proper torus for the space station. This is relatively easy to do. Where's the torus? Make a torus. Don't save. So here's the torus that I made. And all I did with this was flip the normals. So in the ProBuilder, there's an option somewhere to flip normals. And this turns the object inside out. You remember Unity only colors one side of a face and the other side is invisible. And so with this situation, we're looking inside the object and it's transparent from the outside. Interestingly, this also reverses the mesh collider, which means that we can go in, but we can't go out. And once you set this up, you export it from ProBuilder as an asset, and then export that prefab, and brought it into the space station game, and I showed you that the other day. I showed you the space station the other day. I guess maybe this is it. So ProBuilder is a cool tool. It's not a professional content creation tool by any means. It's not as powerful as Blender. It's a lot easier than Blender. But I don't remember which one. New torus, I think that's the one. So this is the torus that I made. And you'll notice we fall into this thing because its colliders are reversed. But I believe now we can actually, whoops, no, we can't. So this doesn't have colliders, sorry. But it does work. So I'm going to end sharing here. And I'm going to stop recording, and I'll see you all in class. Have fun with ProBuilder.